It's a word from that to our life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. The little ones have a place set up for them. So they'll go in the back and then we'll get situated here. Again, we thank God for this day. It's a little bit hot outside. It was extremely hot earlier in the day, but God knows exactly what He's doing. And accordingly to the forecast this weekend, it's supposed to get a little bit cooler. And I think it's supposed to drop back in the 80s. So again, God knows what He's doing. He knows exactly how He's going to do it. So we'll just say thank you anyway. And then for each of you who are here and those of you who are connected with us remotely, and for those who are on their way, we thank God for you. So we finished up with chapter 10 on last time, and we actually started 11 and did the first verse because we were talking about the false balance. So we'll pick up at verse 2, and probably maybe we'll finish those verses in the 11th chapter. If not, we'll just do what we're going to do. But we're going to do what thus saith the Lord. So again, we have bypassed the foundation work and we're actually looking at the Proverbs. These are those things that causes us to look back and think, man, our parents and our grandparents were smart. They didn't necessarily have all of the intellectual intelligence maybe that some of the ones who now have the opportunity to go to school and further go as far as they possibly can go. But yet the horse sense, the things that they said to us in the Proverbs that resembled a lot of these, it made perfectly good sense. And the more we look back on it, the smarter they were. So let's look at verse 2 then as we continue in this 11th chapter. Solomon writes, when pride cometh, then comes shame, but with the lowly is wisdom. So we say it like this: before the fall comes pride. As you look at this particular verse, if you use Matthew Henry as a study guide, he says, how dare us who came from the dirt and we're going back to the dirt. And along the way, we have to depend on God to eat. We have to depend on God for health and strength. We have to depend on God for everything. And then we have the nerve to let pride well up in us like we are self-supporting or self-sustaining. It's no wonder then, because God hates that pride, that's when the shame comes and the fall takes place. On the other hand, the man in verse 3, who is a man of integrity or honesty, notice what it says of him. The integrity of the upright shall guide them, but the perverseness of transgressors shall destroy them. So when you say the word integrity, you're talking about those people who have honest moral values that live accordingly. That's a roadmap and that's a guide, because that's actually piloted by God Himself. On the other hand, those people who are perverse and those folk who are full of transgression, well, they're going to be destroyed. And here's a simple maximum: the sin that you love is what will destroy you. So any sinner that's caught up and cannot find his way out of it, or will not find his way out of it, it's eventually going to destroy him, because we know that the wage of sin is death. It always have been, and it always will be. Once God saw that we were lost and deserved to die and was full of sin, He said, I'll fix it. I'll give you a substitute. However, wisdom says you have to receive it, because grace offered has to be grace received. If we continue in our sin, we're going to die. Okay? Look at verse 4. Riches profit nothing in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivereth from death. Okay, this verse was kind of cool with the explanation that Matthew Henry gave on it. He literally says we have a debt. We all have a debt. We just said that the wage of sin is death. And we know that even though we've been absolved of that sin through Jesus Christ, you still have to die. You are going to die. There's not a one of us here that we will not be changed. Now, you can say, well, wait a minute, preacher. The Bible says that some of us will be left alive. That's true. But you're not going to heaven in the body that you now possess. You're going to have to go through the change. So for all intent and purposes, this corrupt body has to die. When you look at that, it follows then, if we owe that debt of death, when we start looking at wasting our time and just chasing after the things of the world and putting all of our time and effort and energies in those things that we can see, when it's time to pay up, because here's the thing, after death comes judgment. And as such, we have to be accountable for what we've done while we're alive. And it's a very simple choice. If you live with God, if you serve God, if you're born again, you're going to die only one time. If you're not born again, you are going to die 2 times. 1 birth, 2 deaths, 2 births, 1 death. And the judgment is going to follow. So understand, if we waste our time on things that are not for the good of our soul's salvation, we are going to die, and we are going to meet God in his anger and in his wrath. On the other hand, the righteous is delivered from death. There is no deep theological discussion that we have to go through to understand that. Receive the Lord, and that's what puts us in a right place with God. So that's what makes us righteous, because we are not of our own. And because of that, he says, now, come on into my house. You can live with me forever. Simple as that, isn't it? Any questions or comments? So if you look at verse 5 and 6 together, because they say the same thing, the righteousness of the perfect shall direct his way, but the wicked shall fall by his own wickedness. The righteousness of the upright shall deliver them, but transgressors shall be taken in their own naughtiness. So again, what makes me right? What puts me in that right or righteous, puts me in that right standing place with God is the blood of Jesus. Now we know in Solomon's day, it was in keeping with the law, and accordingly, we know what the law did and how it brought us up to grace and truth. So it actually works for them as well. They had to keep the law and they had to walk accordingly. And that's what put them in that right standing, by following those commandments. The wicked, on the other hand, says, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to listen to the law. I'm not going to be governed by the commandments. Okay, so you're going to die in your wickedness. And the exact same thing, the transgressions shall be their own naughtiness, or shall be taken in their own naughtiness. And Jesus says it like this: when I come back, if I find you filthy, you're still going to be filthy. Yeah. If I find you righteous, you're still going to be righteous. So just the way you are, that's the way you're going to be. You ever hear people when they say, well, preacher, that's being judgmental, and you're judging me? You ever heard that? And again, I say to you, if you look accordingly, it is as plain as your hands in front of you. If a person is living an ungodly life, accordingly, they will let you know, because we are who we are. And over and over again, we try to oversimplify it by saying, if you've got an apple tree and that apple tree is growing oranges, tell me how much of a judge you have to be to look and go, wait a second, that's an apple tree growing oranges. There's something wrong with that. And that's just as plain and simple as it can be. As we looked before, when we were talking about staying away from those folk who project and present those kind of lives, let me ask you something. Were your parents being judges when they told you, don't you go out with that boy, because that boy trouble? Don't you hang out with that crowd, because they'll get you in trouble? We already saw accordingly. And if you look at these verses, and we are what we are. The righteous are going to do the right thing. The unrighteous are going to follow their own path. Before we get so caught up with, well, you're just judging me. That's exactly what you were told, to stay away from them, because early on we saw they're going to try to entice you to come and be a part of them. And they tell you straight up, okay, we are planning to lie in wait for those people who don't expect us to be here. And when they come by, we're going to mug them, we're going to rob them, we're going to steal from them, then we're going to take the booty and put it in the house. And if you go with us, we'll separate and divide, and all of us will have so much stuff. How much of a judge do you have to be when you look at the presentation and then you are told, don't go down that path, don't go with them? So when people say that, I look and I go, okay, so what do you want to do then? You just want to leave your children at the mercy of anything and everything that comes before them, because you're going to sit here and listen to people say, well, you can't judge me. I don't have to. You judge your own self, because the lifestyle that you're living is exactly who you are. And the lifestyle that you're living, it is written in black and white here exactly where you are headed. See how that works? He goes on a little bit further in verse 7. He says, when a wicked man die, his expectation shall perish, and the hope of the unjust man, it shall perish, and the hope of unjust men perisheth. So it comes to nothing. And that's easy. And again, you don't have to sit back and try to pretend like you're so sanctimonious that you can just say, well, you're going to hell and you ain't saved. You don't have to do that, because they will present it themselves. But you do have to have the smarts not to get caught up with that, so you don't follow that same path. Because everything that they have devised, everything that they think, everything that they have hoped for, everything that they work for, as soon as they die, it's done. But what did we say? I think it was in a eulogy we did not long ago. Martin, one of his favorite Greek philosophers, was Euripides. And Euripides said, the works of a good man does not die with him. Just keeps right on going, because it speaks all in eternity. And we know this to be true, because before Euripides ever thought about that, Jesus said, and their work shall follow them. So what you do here, it's going to follow you through eternity. So you don't have to do anything. It just look at the horse sense here, the common sense of practical religion, and know you need to live a good life. Because if you live a good life, then you'll have a good death. If you have a good death, then your good works will follow you right on into eternity. He says in verse 8, the righteous is delivered out of trouble, and the wicked cometh in his stead. So take heart. When you're living for the Lord, even though the trouble, and in some cases the trouble that you encounter is coming from wicked people, God says, I'm going to take you out of that. And I'm going to mess around and let the wicked go right back into it. If you use Matthew Henry as your study guide, he talks about Mordecai and Haman. Haman was a wicked man, and we all know it. Mordecai was a righteous man. And because Haman hated righteousness, he built a gallows to hang Mordecai, and he ended up hanging on his own gallows, because God said, I'm going to take you out of the way of trouble, but I'm going to bring you right in the midst of it. There are other examples that we could use and see how that works. But that just makes sense, doesn't it? It just makes perfectly good sense. So Solomon is really not doing anything except just tapping into the common sense of everyday practical religion. All right? Any questions or comments? This is an interesting one in verse 9. A hypocrite with his mouth destroyeth his neighbor.
All right. Yes.
But through knowledge shall the just be delivered. What makes somebody a hypocrite that talks to you and say all kinds of stuff to you? We could look at it that way. Say again? That's a hypocrite. But in the context that it's written, look at this. A hypocrite with his mouth destroyeth his neighbor. He's deceitful. He's full of flattery. At the same time, he's saying, oh, this is good. I'm in it for your good. He's lying, and he's going to tear you down when your back is turned. Please, we shouldn't ever talk about that kind of stuff happening in the church. Preacher, here's how we do it. Smiling in my face with a knife in my back. That should not happen. That absolutely should not happen. because that's a whole different agenda from what God would have us to do. We already saw that you should not be at odds with your neighbor without a reason. And you should not be practicing evil against your neighbor who thinks that you are living in the neighborhood safely together. You shouldn't be sitting up in that sanctuary right next to somebody and telling them, oh, yeah, that dress looks so good today, and walk away. You know, I can't stand her. That should not happen in the church, but unfortunately, it does. We sit and listen to you preach, and you preach truth. And people say, go ahead, evangelist. It looked like she'd have sat down because all she was doing was throwing off on me. You are a hypocrite when you do that. And then turn around and, well, keep on going. Why? Just don't say nothing. You'd be a whole lot better off because God is watching. On the other hand, the righteous person, they know that knowledge is going to deliver. They understand that all I got to do is use my good sense, and I'm going to walk right through this. One of the things that we see in our country, the hypocrisy of pretending with your mouth to do the right thing by your neighbors. Every time we hear about protecting the borders, and every time we hear about Christian nationalists and all that kind of nonsense, and the analogy that's being used, this is what's being peddled. Okay, so we should get rid of everybody that's not American because they're the ones killing and robbing and stealing and taking jobs. That's a lie. That's an absolute lie. You got as many people born in this country who are native born Americans who kill, steal, lie, cheat, and do everything under the sun. But it's like, let's push that aside and put it all on these folks. And there are honest, hardworking people who are simply trying to do what is necessary to get their family in a better place, who are neighbors to some of those same folk, and all they do is run them down and lie. And God says, you think I don't see that? The prudent man says, why are you doing that? The prudent man says, let's look for the benefit of the doubt. And if you trace your lineage, you'll find out that you probably are not native to this country. The only ones that are those indigenous people that we call Indians, but they ain't call themselves Indians. That was something we came up with. Those indigenous people went by the name of Cherokee and Iroquois and Seminole and Apache and everything else that they designated for themselves. But then you have to hear that, and then you look at this and you go, wait a second. Because then, well, my neighbor, well, Jesus says, so tell me, who is your neighbor? Who is your neighbor? So when you start trying to distinguish based on ethnicity, based on your skin color, and where that ain't what Jesus said. That is not what he said. And for 1 second, if we think we're going to get away with that, God says, I got news for you. You're not, because I see every bit of that. All right? Any questions, comments? Now, you look at verse 10, here's a total contradiction if we put 10 and 11 together of verse 9, because 10 and 11 together says the same thing. When it goeth well with the righteous, the city rejoiceth. And when the wicked perish, there is shouting. By the blessings of the upright, the city is exalted, but it is overthrown by the mouth of the wicked. So if we are in fact looking at this the way it's intended, is a righteous man only a certain ethnicity? Absolutely not. Because the Bible said, whosoever will, let him come. And Jesus came, not that some, but all. Everybody that will honor, obey, and adhere to the fact that God said, okay, here's your substitution. And by his faithfulness, when he said it is finished, he worked out your salvation. Now, if you receive that and accept that, I'm not going to say you're disqualified because you weren't born in the right country. On the other hand, all of the righteous men, when it goeth well with the righteous, the city rejoiceth. Now we can read that another way. Prayer exalts any nation. Sin, it's a reproach. And people got enough sense to know it because they can recognize good and righteous when it's going on and they rejoice with it. But when the wicked perish, they're shouting. Now, this may sound like a hateful statement from a preacher, but we have leadership in this country. When they ain't there no more, you're going to have people saying, oh, happy day. Because they got enough sense to recognize a lot of the hardships that you're going through is because of bad leadership. A sinful spirit that says, I don't care about you. I'm going to get mine. Whereas when we come to church, the church is a place of rejoicing because it is a city, because the righteous is doing the right thing, and there is rejoicing. That doesn't just work in the church, because contrary to popular belief, when you don't have a good solid church, you don't have a good solid state. You can't separate church from state in that way, because if you don't have a church, you don't have a state that's going to continue to sustain itself, because you don't do that on your own. You do that by the grace of God. So it's kind of simple in there. And that whole notion about the blessings and the city being exalted and the city being overthrown by the mouth of the wicked. Corrupt communications will corrupt a whole people. So again, you're not living under a rock. Every single time you listen and you hear the corrupt communications that's coming, and it seems like it's permeating all of our politics. Only thing you really want when it comes to the end of the day is to live peaceably with your neighbor, be able to live a good life, worship your God, and just be at peace. And the expectation is that if we're going to have good leaders that are pushing that both in a religious and a civil way, because in Sunday school we saw that. We did, didn't we? We saw that God said, I got this against you. Not just the religious leaders, but the political leaders. Because they were the sheep, or the shepherds rather, that was supposed to be taking care of the sheep, and they were fleecing them just as hard as they could. So it's all related, one thing to the other, and God says, but I see that. And you got enough sense to know when you're hearing people slinging mud and all that kind of stuff, what do you really want to hear? You know what? Let's work together, and let's take the issues and the problems and the situations that's in front of us, and let's sit down together and find middle ground, and let's do the right thing for everybody. That's what you really want to hear. All that other stuff, that's just a waste of time. And it brings out the worst of us instead of the best of us, and it goes contrary to what is being said here. But when the righteous do their thing, the city is exalted and the city rejoices. Questions, comments? In verse 12, he that is void of wisdom despiseth his neighbor, but a man of understanding holdeth his peace. That's a good one. Goes with 13:2. A talebearer revealeth secrets, but he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter. So let's look at 12 first. I wrote in my notes here of 13, he who belittles another lacks sense. And when you hear, okay, I don't agree with you, so that means you're a jihadist. That means you're a communist. That means you're scum. You're a lowlife. Look at what he just said. He that is void of wisdom despiseth his neighbor. And he sinks to so many depths to make that disgust and that dislike known. He can't even control his tongue. That's a bad thing, because James tells us that if you can put the bridle in the horse's mouth and control that 2,000-pound animal, and you can put a rudder on a ship and control the course of that ship, it looked like you'd be able to bridle that tongue, because you understand that tongue is a flame of fire, and it will set on fire everything that it comes in contact. Well, you don't have enough good sense to be able to control it. A man of understanding, he knows how to keep his peace, hold his peace. He knows when to speak and when not to speak. Because just because you know a thing don't mean you have to say it all the time. Discretion and prudence will say, let me just sit here and watch. And after everything has come back around, then God will present the time that you can actually speak. This is the same vein in which a talebearer or a gossip reveals themselves. All right? We got church leaders in here. We got 2 deacons sitting there. We got an evangelist sitting here. We got a church mother sitting next to another church mother. Let me ask you something. If somebody came to you in confidence, look at verse 13. If somebody came to you in confidence and they're speaking to you about an issue or a situation going on in their lives, are you supposed to run out and tell them? No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The gossip, that's the reason why you better be careful who you take in confidence with you and who you share stuff with. Because the old people used to say it like this: a dog that will bring a bone will carry a bone. And you can't say any and everything in front of them, especially when it's something that you're speaking in conference, or in confidence rather. A wise man with a faithful spirit, which is exactly what should be in these deacons and this evangelist and these mothers, when somebody comes to you and they're in trouble and they're hurting and they're putting their confidence in you that they can depend on you to come and say, okay, here's what's going on with me. Can you help me? All right. Your course then is to say, yes, I can. And here's what we're going to do. And then you start speaking. How many times have you heard me say this, guys? When we're in a meeting, when we're talking about church business and we're talking about sensitive matters, that's between you and me and God. And I'll say to you, if you hear it, God didn't tell it. And I ain't going to say nothing about it. So that means you had to go out and carry it. So we don't do that, right? You absolutely do not do that, because you can make a huge difference in somebody's life by simply holding on and being a help. That's simple, isn't it? All right? Any questions or comments? He says in verse 14, same vein, where no counsel is, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. So I think, was it last Sunday or the Sunday before, we were talking about church leadership, and God was talking about the shepherds and how he says, okay, so I see what you're doing. I see how you're fleecing my sheep. I see how you are eating them up, but you're not putting back. Well, when you talk about good leadership and good counsel, because we talked a few months ago from the book of Isaiah, when we were talking about, okay, when you get what you ask for, so you better be careful how you vote. Don't just follow the pattern. Well, my mama was a Democrat, and her mama was a Democrat, and her mama was. That don't make no difference. You look at the person. You can be registered Democrat, you can be independent, you can be Republican, you can be what you want to be, but you ought to listen to what's coming from that person that you're getting ready to trust with not just your everyday goings on, but with your children's future as well. So you better pay attention and make sure that you're hearing something that makes good sense. Because if you don't, then you're going to get stuck with the kind of leadership that God says, but I see exactly what you're doing. And understand, this is a two-way street, as we did in Sunday school. If you look at it from a secular point of view or from a religious point of view. So let's take the church, because that's where we are. When you talk about good church leadership, you have to understand, as I look at you now, and the metaphor was, here's the shepherd, here's the sheep. All right? So I'm the under shepherd. You're the sheep. So my job is to look after the welfare of the sheep. As such, he says, I see what you're doing. You are in fact killing them and using their wool to make your clothes, and that's okay. You are in fact killing them because that's the meat that you're supposed to eat, because no farmer plants a crop and then doesn't benefit from the harvest of that crop. However, that farmer and that shepherd has to be a good steward of the responsibility in which they have been given. So if you're going to use the flock to maintain you, then that means you have to maintain the flock, and you got to constantly be growing the flock. Because let me ask you something. If you got a flock of 25 cows and all you do is slaughter them and eat them, and you're not replacing it, how long are you going to really have a flock? You're going to eat up the very thing that you're supposed to be maintaining. And God says, I see that. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take them away from you. And I remind you, they were mine before I ever entrusted you with them. And because you were such a bad steward and such a bad shepherd to my sheep, I'm going to take them away. And then I'm going to come down on you. These are my words now, like a ton of bricks. Because woe unto that shepherd that scattereth the flock. You are supposed to be maintaining. If you are a good counselor, where there is a multitude of counselors, there is safety. So when you look at what we say from a government's point of view in the church and in the secular government, the right hand of the pastor, the board of deacons. That's the reason why initially when I first came here, okay, you were not on the board, but you were. Okay, you know what, guys? We need to be walking together all the time. Because if we're not walking together and we're not sharing with one another the good counsel that is supposed to be for the welfare of the church, when we walk out there, people are going to see it. They're going to notice right away that we are not together. We are not one accord. If we're supposed to be working together as a team of ministers, and you're in a support role, and the pastor is here, and everything falls into place, if we're not there, it ain't going to take but 5 seconds for people to say, how they going to talk to us about walking together? And they're not walking together. It will destroy. It will destroy. Yeah. Where no counsel is, the people fall. When you tear up a church, just put raggedy leadership in it. All right. And Jesus already knew that. He already knew that. That's the reason why he said, Peter, do you love me? All right. Yes, I do, Lord. Then feed my lamb. Yeah. Peter, you sure you love me? Lord, you know I do. Then feed my sheep. Yeah. Peter, are you absolutely sure that you love me? Well, now, Lord, you know everything. And I'm getting a little bit in a tizzy here because you know me. Then feed my sheep. And then when he got distracted, he said, but what about John? Well, what's going to happen to him? If he tarries, or if he tarries till I come back, what is that to you? You do what I told you to do, because I just gave you your marching instructions. And you let me take care of him, because he has his own to do. But I need you, look after my sheep. Look after my sheep. And if we take that attitude, and the counsel is right, and we're all agreeing and touching and doing what's good for the church, there's going to be safety. Yes. Makes sense, doesn't it? Yes. He jumps on to something else in verse 15. I think we saw this in Sunday school some quarters ago, because it all keeps coming around. He that is surety for a stranger shall smart for it, and he that hateth suretyship is sure. You know what he just said? If you go and you loan money and you give stuff in your house to a stranger who has proven himself to not be trustworthy, you're going to put your house in a bind. This is where you have to have discretion. And you have to use that discretion. And we take it all the way to the point where I say to the deacons, pay attention. Because everybody that comes knocking on this door saying, I need help, take a good look at it and use the discernment that God has given you, because it's the same thing. You don't want to rob your house and put your name on something, because you remember when you were growing up, I'm old enough that this happened. When I got ready to get my first car, Mama co-signed for me. Well, Mama knew who I was. That word co-sign, you young folk may not know what that is. But co-sign meant that they were saying, she literally said, if he don't make that payment, I'll be responsible. So you can see how I could have got my mama in a bind had I not honored what I said I was going to do. Well, if you take a stranger and somebody that you don't know, and you haven't taken the time to understand, and you go out there and they go, well, the house don't cost but $400,000. Will you co-sign it with me? And you go do it. Suppose they don't pay for it. Guess who they gonna call? Because your name is on it, where you live, and your phone number, and probably where you work. So he says, don't do that, because that's going to it shall smart for you. But if you make the decision, I'm not doing this because I don't know you. Now that's a fine line, because we're always talking about how you're supposed to help. And didn't we actually see earlier, if you have it within your means and somebody come to you and say, can you help me? And you send them away and say, come back tomorrow and I'll give it to you then. Don't do that. Give it to them right then. So it becomes kind of a slippery slope, but that's where your discretion and your discernment comes in. Because you can't just throw money at it and hope that that'll fix it and make it right. They have to be. Otherwise, you don't have anything to maintain the church. Okay?
Because one is securing a loan, whereas you really don't have the money to secure that loan, because you're having to co-sign it with somebody. So if you're having to co-sign, you can't give it to them. But the other is, if you have it, right, within your means, so therefore, if I have that money in my account and I'm able to do for that person that is less, then that's one thing. So they're weighted different because of the fact that one is a loan that neither of you have, that you guys go borrow from somebody else, and that's what binds you. Does that make sense?
And that's why.
Trying to secure something for somebody else that you yourself don't have, that's something. But if you have it within your means, yes, to give someone some food, to give someone, to help them to pay their light bill, and it's not like I've done that many times, and it didn't bother my pocket one bit. But if it does somebody else, then you don't have to do it. Then you can't do it, right?
And
If I got to do it, say, Pastor, I need extra money to give this person for their loan, then I'm trying to secure something I don't have. Right? So,
and you're right. We have to weigh them different. But the problem is when people say, but if that's written in there, then why should I give? And why should I have the benevolence? That's the reason why I said it's kind of a slippery slope in there. But you got to see the difference. And a discerning person will and notice, yeah, that's different. But, you know, just like I know, people would, because that's how when I started with judging a while ago, people would take a biblical principle and they'll try to make it fit what they want done, and then they'll start pulling scriptures out of the book that they don't pay attention to and don't know anything about. So you're absolutely right. You have to weigh them, because there is a different weight with both of them. Again, that's the whole reason behind the Proverbs. What does wisdom teach you? To be able to make wise, godly choices in an ungodly, unwise world. Okay? Good point. You're absolutely right. Any other questions, comments? All right. This is an interesting one, because as much as we love to use metaphorically women, here is a fair comparison. He says in verse 16, a gracious woman retaineth honor, and strong men retaineth riches. So we look at that and we say, okay, well, that's a fair comparison. A woman of virtue works to preserve her reputation, wisdom, and her modesty, as a man holds to his riches. Doesn't necessarily imply here it's a good man or a bad man, but the effort that's put into it, this good woman, this gracious woman, will work to retain those qualities that makes her a good woman. Now, I'll go a little bit further with that as we go on further, because let me see. Sometimes we lose our mind. Maybe I'll get to 22 tonight. So you kind of keep that in your brain as we go toward 22, because there is a huge difference between a gracious woman and a not so gracious woman. All right. Verse 17, the merciful man doeth good to his own soul, but he that is cruel troubleth his own soul. So what in the world is he talking about there? What does that mean? Kind men do themselves good, but cruel men do themselves harm. You've heard the old adage, well, I'm looking out for number one because self-preservation is job one. There's an interesting paradox. Because if self-preservation is job one, then the first thing you need to do is get right with God. If self-preservation is job number one, then the first thing you need to do is get right with God. Because when you get right with God, he'll teach you how to be a kind man and teach you how to spread that kindness all around, and it will be health to your own soul. Because first of all, let me ask you something. Who can you love if you don't love yourself? Nobody. Because, and then preacher, wait, no. The Bible says this, love thy neighbor as thyself. And I'm not talking about some conceited, arrogant impression of who I am or how good looking and handsome. I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about the person who loves themselves enough to own that I need a Savior. And then I learned how to love right because I love him because he first loved me. And then I've got the thing in perspective, and then I understand that that love can spread all around, and it only does me good whenever I'm loving and kind and gentle. We found out that when you talk about the fruit of the Spirit, all of those things are included in that. So I'm doing myself good. On the other hand, the man who troubles his own flesh, who doesn't have enough sense to love himself, he can't do for somebody else what he haven't done for himself. And that's the reason why people who are not born again don't understand anything about love, because they don't love themselves. If they did, there was an old preacher, old fellow, when I was a young man, Reverend Mac Parker. As soon as the sermon was over, the choir understood Reverend Mac Parker is going to sing the invitational hymn. And you know what it was? Every single time he was there, he'd start to sing, "You better run. You better run to the city of refuge. You better run." And then he'd say, "My daddy had to run. My mama had to run. You better run." In other words, he was saying, if you love yourself, you better start heading to that city of refuge, and you better find Jesus and get born again and get saved right now. Because if you don't, you're going to die and go to hell. And if you're that embittered along the way, how can you be good to anybody? You're not doing yourself or anybody else any good whatsoever. That's terrible. That's the reason why you hear me say sometimes, you know who is the worst people in the world? Mean old people who about to die and don't know Jesus. They no good for themselves, and that's why they're so ornery and so hard to get along with. On the other hand, those 80, 90, and even beyond who are born again, and you go to them, and the first word that come out of their mouth, "Oh, honey, I'm glad to see you." And everything that comes from them is inviting and encouraging and uplifting, because they figured out a long time ago, I love Jesus with everything in me. Then love your neighbor as yourself. Makes sense, doesn't it? Any questions, comments? Verse 18, "The wicked worketh a deceitful work, but to him that soweth righteousness shall be a sure reward." That's a simple premise of sowing and reaping. And if you got one of these Bibles that we have here at the church, it gives you, when you look at that, let's see, the wicked worketh a deceitful work, but to him that soweth righteousness. And when you look at that, it takes you straight to Galatians 6, 8, and 9. And you'll notice there, when God says, don't deceive yourself. Whatever a man sow, that shall he also reap. This is a simple premise of sowing and reaping. If you sow good stuff you're going to reap. If you sow bad stuff you're going to reap. If you sow to the Spirit, then of the Spirit you shall receive. If you sow to the flesh, then corruption is what you're going to get. That's all he says here. He just says it in a different way. All right? He says in verse 19, "As righteousness tendereth to life, so he that pursueth evil pursueth it to his own death." That's pretty easy, isn't it? Righteousness tendeth to life. Well, again, the way you live is the way you're going to be, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And contrary to popular belief, when you hear people say, well, if God is that good, is he really going to send me to hell? Let me ask you, how many people have God sent to hell? How many people have God sent to hell? None. Yes, we do. God don't send people to hell. People send people to hell. God has hell designed for the devil and the fallen angels that had the audacity to go with him. Hell was never included or created for any of you. It enlarges itself. And why? Hell and destructions are never full because the eyes of man are never satisfied. So what does that say? You go where you decide you're going to go. So God never sent anybody to hell. He gave you a choice. Just like he did from the very beginning. He said to Adam, all these trees in all of this big old garden, you can eat from every one of them, but that one right there, don't touch it. He gave him a choice. So did God throw Adam out of the garden? No. Adam threw himself out of the garden. God did him a favor by escorting him out, because watch this. Had he been there and had he and Eve kept or been able to eat, because we haven't read, we can't say definitively, but we can surmise, well, they were probably eaten because they were eternal. But once they sinned, God said, we got to get them out, lest they eat of the tree of life and they don't die. Well, if they didn't die, where would the redemption come from? Because had he stayed in the state that he was in, he would have never been able to be redeemed. So as death came in, and God says, all right, you messed it up, but the second Adam, you brought death, but the second one is going to be a quickening spirit. So you understand, God says, even then, I gave him a choice and I give you a choice. You can decide. You can decide. And over and over again, from Joshua to Elijah to Moses, choose. Choose ye this day. If Baal is God, then serve him. But if God be God, then serve him. And nothing has changed. So that everybody who woke up in hell this morning and went, oh my goodness, I didn't have to be here. I had ample opportunity to make sure that I didn't end up here. Well, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. God watched you and God allowed you to make your own choice. But you have to understand, with that choice, there is a consequence. Either you're going home with me or you're not. That's the way that goes. Yes, ma'am. Well, as church people, that's our mission. That's our job. It goes back to what we said a while ago. If you are loving, then your heart breaks every time the thought of somebody dies and they die outside the ark of safety. What's the hardest eulogy to do? The hardest eulogy to do. The hardest funeral address to do. What's the hardest one? For that person who's not saved. Because you know it. You know it. I use this.
You don't know really. Well, you know what to say, but you really focus more on the family than you do.
And it becomes a funeral address. I use this disclaimer. I'm not here to try to preach them into heaven. And I'm also not here to try to prevent them. Because that was already done. All of those chapters, that book, it's finished. Only thing I can do is be a witness to truth. And truth is, time is a gift from God. That's what we did the last time and the last one we did. Time is a gift from God. What you choose to do with it, that's totally up to you. That is totally up to you. Now, we're reminded by the scriptures. Moses looks at God and he says, teach me to number my days, that I can apply my heart to wisdom, that I can make a choice that I'm going to be able to live with you forever, because I see your anger. I appreciate it and I acknowledge it because I know why it's there. But then you turn around and you give us the opportunity to have a wise heart, so that just exactly what you said, when a witness talks to me and says, hey, let me tell you about somebody who can fix your life. And when a preacher is standing saying, this is the way to make sure you don't land in hell and you don't go down to the abyss. And after you go through your presentation in one form or the other, it's always going to find its way back to Isaiah 53:1. Who have believed our report? And to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? So in other words, I've told you what I'm going to say, and I've given you the good stuff that you need. Do you believe it? And have you allowed the Holy Spirit to come into your life and reveal who he is to you and not slam the door? That's all we did. However you say it, that's all we did. Now, choice is yours. And you're going to live or die based on that choice. All right? Yes, ma'am.
The life we live, people see it. God like to shine, people speak for us.
You are who you are.
Some people try to hide because they don't go to test and trial, don't want to deal with this, deal with that, but let it shine.
You are who you are. So just be that, because God's going to know. If you're gonna go to hell, get rid of your Volkswagen. Just get your Cadillac. Don't be playing. Just go. If you're going to go to heaven, then get you a chariot and go on to heaven. All right? Because you are what you are. Which verse was that? That was 19, right? So 20. As we look at 20, they that are of forward heart are abomination to the Lord. But such as are upright in their ways are his delight. We use that word abomination all the time, don't we? What does the word abomination mean? Say again? God despises it. What is that stuff? An abomination. An exceptionally loathsome, hateful, sinful, wicked, or vile person. And God's reaction is, yes, I hate it. It disgusts me. So when you start talking about abomination, and see, here's what people do. People are funny, and they think that God don't know. Yeah, well, this sin ain't so bad, and that sin, and that's the reason why certain segments go, okay, but yeah, you don't understand. I was born this way. Newsflash. Newsflash. How old is that little child right there that I heard talking a while ago and just nonstop? She's 4. Oh, my goodness. Did you know that that 4-year-old little girl, according to the scriptures, was born and shapen in sin and iniquity? She has a propensity to be just as vile and evil as she can be, because we all have it. It's called the sin sickness that was intrinsically put in us after the fall in the garden. So it's there. So to play games with God and pretend like, yeah, well, I was born this way. So was I. That's why he says to Nicodemus, when he comes to him and he says, okay, so we recognize you came from God. You have to be rabbi, because nobody can do what you do except they came from God. Okay, let me just cut to the chase. If you're not born again, you cannot see God's kingdom in peace. Well, what are you talking about, Jesus? I'm an old man. I got to go back and be reborn again. You ain't listening to me. The second birth. The second birth. Even if you could go back and be born physically of your mama over and over and over and over and over again, that which is of the earth is earthly, but that which is of the Spirit is spirit. I'm not talking about that natural birth. That's the one that saw you as the sinful person you are. It's the second birth. When you come to Jesus and say, make me over. I don't want to be what I was. I want to be what you need me to be. That's the second birth that then gets rid of all that other nonsense. So every time somebody says to you, well, I was born that way. Yeah, I know. I understand. So was I. That's the reason why the old pastors used to do it like this. Put their hand on their ear and say, you must be, you gotta be born again. Because if you're not, you're not going to heaven. That's the way that, y'all remember this, those old homiletic, old time preachers that, anyway, but that was the point. That was the emphasis. You got to be born again. You have to be, because otherwise you ain't going. You are not going, because God despises that. The upright, on the other hand, his ways are their delight, because they are walking in the steps that he have ordered. Now, watch this, verse 21. We're going to get to 22, hopefully, and then we're going home. Though hands join in hands, the wicked shall not go unpunished, but the seed of the righteous shall be delivered. Okay, in real time, in application, we can look at this again, because we see that notion that birds of a feather flock together. And when we look at Washington and we see one liar standing up trying to hold on to another's lie, and you go behind him and you go, oh, no, he didn't say. Yeah, he did. We heard him. Yeah, but that's exactly what he meant. And your lying and your holding hands together is not going to keep you from being punished by God. Wickedness is not going to go unpunished. And I don't care how many lies, and I don't care what kind of confederacy, and I don't care what kind of group you hang on to, God sees every single bit of it. All right? And now, this shouldn't happen in the church, but even when we have our little cliques and our little groups, and we walk around and we do the exact same thing, God says, I see you. I see you, and I don't care whose hand you hold or how much influence you think, well, but they were here from the beginning, and their daddy gave so much money for the land of the church, and blah, blah, blah. God says it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you're in that confederacy and it's not right, I'm going to see right through it, and I'm going to take care of it. But the seed of the righteous shall be delivered. Let's look at 22, and then we're going to go home. Because remember, we just talked about this gracious woman in verse 16. This is an interesting verse. Because he says in verse 22, as a jewel of gold in a swine's snout, so is a fair woman which is without discretion. She ain't got no sense. One of the things that bothers me sometimes, and I got two church mothers here, and I got an evangelist and some other older women. Sometimes when I see beautiful women, because let me show you something. You didn't just grow up and say, oh my gosh, I want to be beautiful. God did that. Yeah. God did that. So you have to understand that like anything else, is a gift. Beauty comes from God, and it should not be abused. Beauty should be adorned by modesty and grace. You ever heard that expression, and at the risk of having our little folk in here, you ever heard that expression, oh my goodness, she left nothing to the imagination? You know what bothers me? When I'm sitting in church and I see a woman come in, and she's dressed in such a way that every man who walked in this church, who had his mind on Jesus, but as soon as she walks by him, his mind leaves Jesus and his eyes go straight to her. That bothers me. And that's one of the reasons why, and I'm 65, okay? Everybody know that, but let me tell you again, I'm 65. There was a day when the old church mothers would survey the horizon. You didn't walk in the church looking any kind of way. I don't care how pretty you thought you were. Because those old ladies would discreetly and righteously go to them and say, honey, let's talk. Come here, girl, let's talk. Come here, honey. That's what they did. And they didn't allow any and everything to walk into the church. It's disrespectful. It's wrong to disrespect the God of this house. I'm talking about God, Jesus. It's wrong to disrespect him, to even show up on his ground. When you present yourself in a way that everybody whose mind is on Jesus, as soon as they see you, it leaves Jesus. Your beauty then is like a pig with a diamond earring in his snout. Because all he's going to do is take that diamond earring and he's going to root around in the mud and the filth. So when you take the beauty that God has given you, and if you want to put it in the proper context, and you want to put it in the proper order, every woman should be beautiful in the eyes of her Creator and should do nothing to diminish that beauty by operating in filthy lust. Shouldn't happen. And it works for guys also. We shouldn't walk up in here acting like, I'm going to let everybody see how masculine and macho I am. You shouldn't do that. Again, this is pretty cool. As a jewel of gold in a swine's snout, so is a fair woman which is without discretion. And let me share something with you. With discretion, with good common sense, because we understand the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Get wisdom. In all your getting, get wisdom. Know God first, and then everything else will fall into place. So with that being said, that discretion will allow itself not just to live on the inside of you, it will manifest itself on the outside of you. Because we just saw in several of these verses, you are who you are. You are going to be what you are. So when you walk up in here and your little mini skirt is so high that every step you take, you expose yourself, you ain't got much sense. You get on my nerves when I see it. I can't go to them because first thing they're going to scream is sexual abuse. But you old mothers, that's your job. You should see it and you should intercept it, and you should, in a godly, discreet way, say, honey, that's not presentable. You know what the problem is, though? The old people, the old women, the old men, here's what the Bible said. Those old women distinguished themselves. Those godly women of old, they adorn themselves with modesty. Their exterior exemplified their righteous interior. Well, women ain't supposed to wear this. No, I ain't say that. I did not say that. I did not say that. Modesty and shamefacedness will be guided by the Holy Ghost that's in you. Should you look good for your husband? Yeah. Should you keep yourself for your wife? Yeah. That is a given. But you don't go out showboating, and you don't go out doing crazy, foolish stuff, advertising and packaging something that you should not be projecting. But the problem is, the old women stop telling the young women, because the old women come up here 67 years old in leather breeches, leather pants, way too tight, way too uncomely. You ought to grow up. And you old guys thinking about, you still so attractive that the young women ain't looking at nothing but your wallet. Don't you fool yourself. Don't you fool yourself. A pig with a diamond in his snout rooting in the mud. That don't even make no sense. That don't make no sense, coming nor going. Let's go home. All righty then. 7 days from now will be the 26th. We are running out of August. So be aware, Sunday, 3 o'clock, the male chorus anniversary. 3:30? 2:30. Okay, don't come at 3 o'clock. 2:30.